The lights flash in your rearview mirror, and moments later the cop is leaning in your window. "Who do you think you are, Mario Andretti?" he says. It's a rhetorical question, of course. Neither you nor the cop actually knows Mario, but his name is a kind of shorthand that instantly communicates the whole idea of speed. Mario Andretti. It's the fastest-sounding name in racing, and his signature roars by at 200 miles an hour. While other drivers tend to be measured by their records, by wins and championships, Mario is more like a force you measure on the Richter scale. He was born in northern Italy, and along with his family immigrated to the United States when he was 15. "I lived the American dream," he has said, "because I was able to pursue at a very early age what I set as my goals. In those early years, the 1960s, his goals called for winning every kind of race: stock cars, sports cars, and single-seaters. Victories on the dangerous dirt tracks of Pennsylvania, on the high banks of Daytona, the wide flat runways of Sebring, and the historic speedway at Indianapolis. He was the gunslinger who rode into town and beat the best of the best at their own game. He drove without a safety net, and you worried that he would take one risk too many. He liked to say that if everything seemed under control, he wasn't going fast enough. And while he didn't invent that phrase, Mario lived it as no one else has before or since. There's an invisible line that separates the merely great from the handful of champions who change the public perception of their sport, redefining it in their own terms. Tiger Woods is golf, and Mario Andretti is racing. But how did this happen? Winning the World Championship was part of it. 1978, Mario is driving a Lotus for Colin Chapman, and Chapman has designed Formula One's first ground effect car. And Mario's grasp of speedway technology, of stagger and crossway, makes the car nearly invincible. And in 1 year, he wins 6 of his career 12 Grand Prix. He also won races for Enzo Ferrari, including South Africa in 1971, the first race he ever drove for the team. All told, Mario won 109 major races. But curiously, it is his defeats, especially at Indy, that have touched people's hearts. When he won the race in 1969, the victory was so decisive it was taken for granted that the 500 had found a new champion, and that many more wins would follow. But, as is well known, he never won Indy again, in 26 tries. Tom Carnegie saying, "Andretti is slowing on the backstretch," has become part of speedway culture. Even the most casual fans could share the heartbreak and wonder about the role of luck in racing and in life. Mario has known the heights of success and the depths of failure, and deals graciously with both. "I am never bored," he once said. Today, Mario is the family patriarch. His son Michael and grandson Marco have done immeasurable credit to the Andretti dynasty. A Napa Valley winery bears Mario's name. He was voted Driver of the Century by the Associated Press, and the Italian government has made him a Commendatore, Italy's highest civilian honor, bestowed on only one other man from the world of racing, Enzo Ferrari. His house is filled with trophies, shining, highly polished reminders of past glory. But he is very much a man of the moment. He can still cut a fast lap in an IndyCar, and he's widely admired, his opinions sought out at the highest levels. He's our sport's finest ambassador. Who do you think you are, Mario Andretti? There is only one person who can answer yes to that, and he has chosen to honor us with his presence here tonight. Mario Andretti.
Ladies and gentlemen, come on up, Mario. Please. Okay, I have to ask. Did you ever get stopped? And the guy asked you if you were Mario Andretti?
No, I don't get stopped. No.
Because I did, and I said no. What a thrill to have you.
Oh, thank you. Oh gosh, I mean, can't believe this.
We're gonna have some fun tonight, and I think that I've been studying your career and just everything about you for many, many years, and there's so much information, there's so many things you want to talk about, or I want to talk about, and maybe everybody here, and yet we have not that much time, and So, for me, it was how do we ask the questions? What is really interesting? And I think
How you like my socks?
I like those.
They're
That looks like something Letterman would wear.
they're for sale.
Are they?
Yeah.
All right, who's going to buy Mario's socks? $5,000 right now.
They're for sale.
Come on.
I'll go back to
If you wear Mario,
I'll go back to the hotel naked.
well, we need a little bit more wine for that, but anyway. But seriously, it's great to have you here.
I don't know what I ever did to you, but man, you've been way too kind to me.
Well, I haven't asked any questions yet, so let's go.
Oh, okay.
So, okay.
Okay.
It was interesting. A friend of mine who's going to give you a magazine later tonight from 1965. It was an article after you'd won the championship, and a couple things came out. But one of the things that came out of it that I found interesting was that Colin Chapman had actually offered you a Formula One drive on a couple of occasions, and as it got closer to it, he would withdraw it, and promised you a ride in a Lotus 40 US RRC car. Which everybody knows, a Lotus 40 was a Lotus 30 with 10 more mistakes in it. And there's a quote in there that you basically said, "Don't call me, I'll call you." And yet, here you are, years later, you have your greatest success in Formula One with Colin Chapman. You made your debut in Formula One in '68 at Watkins Glen, on pole position, needless to say.
But you don't know how I got there. I mean, you don't know how I got there with Colin. In fact, in '65, when I was a rookie, Jim Clark was, obviously, he was the winner eventually, but he was the rookie the previous year. So we sort of went to events together, and my big objective for me was to get next, or at least to get Colin to notice me somehow. But before we left in 1965, and of course I was lucky enough to finish third to Jim. The fact is, I went to Colin. I said, "Colin, someday I'd like to do Formula One." And he said, "Mario," he says, "when you think you're ready, call me." And that was a fact. And that's when I really decided to get involved in a lot more sports car racing. Get a lot more road racing under my belt and that sort of thing, which obviously I needed. So that's how this Colin Chapman situation, that's how a relationship began, yeah.
And it's interesting, because I was then reading later on that after this race in '76, you had a bad race.
Yeah.
The Parnelli, the team, was closing the doors, and Lotus had a very bad race. Bob Evans hadn't qualified. Gunnar Nilsson barely qualified. And you're having breakfast, and there's Colin Chapman across the room having breakfast, and you walk over, and it was from that moment. You both kind of, you needed each other at that moment.
Indeed. Actually, it's amazing how some things...
That was a crash and turn, too.
Yeah, no safer barrier either. But, as you said, it was in '76 when I was given, the notice that by none other than Chris Economaki on the grid says, "By the way, Mario, what do you think about this is going to be your last race in Formula One?" So I said, "Oh." But I think Parnelli forgot to tell me that they were going to pull the rug on the program. But anyway, I fell out of the race. I think we punctured a radiator. But the next morning, I'm having breakfast at Queensway Hilton, and I'm alone. My wife didn't even join me because I was so pissed. And Colin was, a few tables away from me, and obviously his chin was in his socks as well. And so I'm looking across, and of course we joined. So we started talking, and again, as you said, he said that I probably had the worst race of our career. And I said, "Well, join the crowd." And I said, "By the way," I said, this is my last Formula One race unless, I get secure or something. And he said, why don't you join me? And he said, but I have nothing to offer you. He said, our cars are really, not what you'd like. And so actually, in so many words, I said, Colin, and I knew he was distracted with his boat company. He started a car company, and, motor racing was not his priority at the time. And I said, Colin, I said, if you come back motor racing 100%, delegate, I said, some of the responsibilities about your car company and the boat company. I said, I'll do that. I said, but I have to be number one on the team because I know that Colin didn't have 2 or 3 of the best. He only had one best, whether it was chassis, engine, or whatever. And that's the deal we made. He said, we're going to have to do with this car, and I said, all right. I said, we'll deal with it. I said, we'll get it better. And he said, and we'll do something for the following year. And quite honestly, in '76, things got better and better through the season. I got, about 3 or 4 podiums toward the end of the season, and we won the last race in Japan. And it was actually, a weird event because of the rain and all that, but I was on pole in the dry the day before. So at least we had something really going. And then, and then the race itself, obviously, there's nothing like winning the last race of the season. You know that.
Good way to
just to get, to get things going, get the momentum. And so as you could see, with him, but with Colin, if you look at his career, it was just like peaks and valleys, And if you were with him, during the peaks, usually there was a chance to really put some numbers up there.
And you didn't have any worries because, let's face it, Lotus was famous. Colin Chapman was famous for everything was a little bit, O2 thin, as they would say, or, stuff broke all the time, or, it was... I understand with you and Bob Dance, who was your chief mechanic, that he really looked out. You said, hey, this needs to be a little bit better. I
always had a really good relationship with mechanics, which is, something that, it's natural, something that is necessary, and it's a feel-good thing, but it's also something that gives you confidence. And the understanding I had with the boys was, hey, if you see something and that a bit precarious or something, I said, just let me know, I'll handle it. And I told Colin, I said, I'm not a candy ass, but I want to keep on racing, if possible, So I know that I can tell you, here's the guy. His mentality was, he wanted to give the driver every opportunity possible, to have the so-called unfair advantage. And I remember we were in South Africa. And it's an altitude course, so obviously you're going to have a little bit less fuel consumption. And it's always, I always used to tell like Bob Dance, put that extra half a gallon in there, which is a lot for him, He said, oh. So anyway, we're on the grid, and I'm on pole, and he's pulling fuel out of the car because he heard that they put an extra gallon in there. And I'm kidding to him. I says, Colin, I said, if I run out of fuel and I'm leading this race, I says, I'm going to have your hide. And we laughed about it. Well, anyway, 2 laps to go. I'm in the lead, and I run out of fuel. and that was in '77, which that race alone would have meant a world championship that year. So, and he ran me out of fuel twice, once in Sweden, leading by 28 seconds or something, So, again, but he was that kind of guy. Like, he wanted to end the race where you had half a liter of fuel in the tank, because he didn't want to have that little extra weight, So it was that kind of thing that you had to fight, with a guy. But nevertheless, usually you were going to have your, you were going to be able to, I think, when he was on, you were going to be able to really achieve some of your most ambitious goals, actually.
Did you ever fly with him? Because I heard that was was an adventure you didn't want. He was probably looking for that half liter to take out too. There.
Yeah, I actually, at the time, I used to have I had a Navajo, the same as his. So, and usually, turbocharged engine and everything, you got to warm up the oil and so forth. We're leaving Hethel, and we're going to Silverstone. And, it's a chilly morning in England, and he's out there, not warming up, and he's just doing an engine run up, and you got the oil pressure right up in the red. And of course, once it goes in the red, once you get too much oil pressure, it bypasses the filters. It bypasses the filters, which means, your turbos sooner or later are going to fail. And so, I used to get like 700 hours on my turbos. Used to get like 50 hours on his turbos, So, and you go out there, at the end of the runway, and he just, throttles to the wall, and all the gauges are in the red, and you just go, oh my God. So that was, it was interesting. Some of his, I got to tell you this one. Silverstone had a grass field, where everybody's just landing, coming in. It was, so one of the morning, because he was going back to Hethel, every night. So on the Saturday morning, we just waited. We wanted to see him come in. It was one of the foggy, misty mornings. And so he's landing in the field, and of course it was going to be long. And he pitches that thing sideways. There's the airplane going sideways right toward the woods, and then it just taxis it right up like nothing, It's just, that was Colin.
So you didn't fly with him too often then?
Not unless I really, really had to.
Let's talk Ferrari. All right. In this magazine that this friend of mine gave me, and it was written in 65 or 6, said that you had actually been offered a Formula One seat that year, but strictly Formula One for 66, and you turned it down.
Yeah, I wasn't ready. I just wasn't ready. And again, this was really the story with Ferrari. It seemed like whenever I got a bona fide offer from them, I couldn't do it. And vice versa. When I was ready, their seats were taken. But I had enough of an experience with them in sports prototypes and so forth. And again, as fate would have it, here I win my very first race in Formula One with Ferrari, and then the second one was the Questra Grand Prix, and and Questra Grand Prix was actually 2 100-milers. So, and the biggest satisfaction at the time was that Jackie Stewart finished second on all of them. So I mean, let's face it, there's a value to that. I always used to say, because it's not only winning, but who you're winning. So I always said, if I win, over Bobby Rahal, it's a damn good win. But if I finish second to Bobby Rahal, it's not a bad day either. You know what I mean? So it's you got to look in those terms. So, with Ferrari, it was that kind of a relationship, and what was valuable was the fact that I pretty much almost began my career with Ferrari, and then ended it, with Monza in '82.
And that's what I want, because obviously, were you ever worried when you told Enzo or whomever it might have been that thanks but no thanks? Were you ever worried that you'd never get asked again?
Well, yes, yeah, for sure. It's one thing you don't refuse them. In fact, at the end of '77, that was my contract, the end of contract year with Lotus, and I already had a handshake with Colin, to go another 3 years, and we didn't sign a contract. So at Monza, Mr. Ferrari he said, he said, I got to talk to you, and so here. After I won Monza in '77, so what a better way to, I was going down on the autostrada. I couldn't even pay tolls. You know what I mean? So I was one of those good,
the best thing about racing in Italy.
Yeah, great feelings. So, so we're sitting with Mr. Ferrari, and I'm we're coming down to, it's always, it's really tough to talk money, with them because they always think it's like Walt Disney, like, you should be just happy to be
there,
here,
yeah.
Walt Disney never paid Mickey Mouse anything, you know what I mean? But, I told Mr. Pryor, I said, I do have a handshake, with Colin Chapman, and I think, there's something very, for me, very important to that. So he said, well, that's what we have lawyers for, He said, so I said, but it's a handshake. And, but anyway, I got to tell you this because, and then Deanne was sitting next to me, my wife, but of course we were speaking Italian, so, she was approving everything. But it come down to the money, and I know what I got out of Colin that time. And so I doubled it. And he said, okay. And I said, oh, no.
Call your lawyers.
I said,
Call the lawyers.
Oh, no. So, and I said, basically, I said, we have a deal, So next day, I'm in the States, and I get a telegram. I said, well, he said, I think maybe we should, okay. I said, I don't think we can finish the deal. Well, what I found out that half hour after I left, Colin Chapman went in there and just ripped him to bits.
Really?
And but the thing that I did, I got Colin Chapman then to triple that.
Yeah. There you go. Leverage.
I said, you know what?
It's called
I
leverage.
said, Colin, you don't want an unhappy driver.
Yeah, that's right.
And so he brought in Courage Beer in there on top of it.
There you go.
So I had to tell you the story.
But I think, and you mentioned it briefly, 82.
Yes.
A tough year for Ferrari. Villeneuve's killed in Belgium. Pironi is grievously injured in Germany. They brought Patrick Tembe in. They call you up. You got to come for the Italian Grand Prix, and you put the car on pole. That had to have been an unbelievable moment. Being an Italian at the Italian Grand Prix, driving for an Italian company. I mean, my God,
Yeah, it was. For sure. I mean, to be invited and under the worst circumstances, but the opportunity and I was really concerned, obviously, but we had a week in between, so we knew we could do some testing. And because this is 1982, and they had introduced all turbo, turbo engines, and I had never driven a turbo Formula One, so I had to get used to a lot of things. But I remember that I think I was telling you earlier. We landed on Friday. We landed in Milan and drove to Maranello. And we were supposed to test Saturday and Sunday in Maranello. And so we land, and of course, we have a nice lunch and so forth. And then I said, let's, I want to get fitted in the car and all that. So I said, I think I want to shake it down. So about 2 o'clock, we shake it down. So between 2 and 6 o'clock, I ran 87 laps. And we actually broke the track record there. And because they put a qualifying thing, I said, and I really liked the car. And the next day we figured, well, okay, then I gave the mechanics, says, weekend off. And the next day I got a motorcycle, Moto Guzzi, and Deanna and I just took a ride up to the Ubertona Pass and so forth. And as I was driving by Maranello, they had all kinds of little like campers and umbrellas. People, waiting for us to test. They thought we were going to test. Yeah. But the point I'm making is when we got to Monza, actually, I really, I had no idea, what it was, but I felt that we were going to be competitive somewhat, but not as competitive as it turned out to be because, the car really felt right. It has to, obviously, And quite honestly, I think we lost a turbo, with about 10, 12 laps to go. I think on the right side, so we finished third. But again, it was an incredibly satisfying weekend, and it's amazing. Like, my the realistic dream started, basically in Monza, and to be able to, to clinch the world championship there under, again, the worst possible circumstances because of Ronnie. But then to end my career also in Monza in Formula One, there were just some of the things that, you could never really, even write a script on that, just.
That's fantastic. Now, I just want to continue with Ferrari just a little bit. I don't know what it is about guys who raced in the 60s and early 70s. I mean, we talked to Roger about his relationship with Hertz Rent-A-Car a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I understand you had a relationship with Hertz too. Following your win with Jackie and the Daytona, it was 6 hours in those days. It wasn't 24 hours.
I'm platinum.
I'm not quite sure what happened, but can you still rent cars from Hertz, or has a statute of limitations?
Well, actually, this was my first Daytona when it was with Pedro Rodriguez, with Ferrari. It was a Luigi Chinetti Ferrari, and in those days we only had one driving suit for the whole 24-hour race. So, and we finished the race, and our hotel was up in Ormond Beach, just a few miles north. And so on the way back, I drove right out to the beach, and we're driving up the beach with this beautiful Ford, I think it was a Fairlane or something, and brand new. And I mean, we stank. We stank somehow. And so we got the windows open, of course, and I figured I'm just going like this and just kind of taking up a little bit of the wake, and all in the water. And finally I get sucked right in. And the water right up to here. And I'm really ashamed saying this, but at least, we're getting, washed up a little bit. But, and I figured, what am I going to do now? So now I had to go up with the payphone. You know how scruffy I was and everything? And I was asking people, like I would ask somebody for a dime, because I didn't have a dime, so I could call Hertz. So some good soul just gave me a dime, and I called Hertz, and I says, you guys, I says, you know what? Can't believe how you guys give these customers these cars. I said, I'm out there, I got sucked right in. And the car just stopped, and then the wave came in and just sucked us right in. I said, and then, I said, guys, yeah. And,
heard that before, huh?
Heard that before, so Avis was really a good company after that for a while.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the dirt track days in the 60s.
Yeah.
And you were one of the best. And there's a great picture that Phil Riley sent me, and it's up there for all of you to see. And if I can hardly see it, but I know who's in it. And it's Bobby. This is the Hoosier 100 in '64. You're off just to the right, apparently, out of the picture, unfortunately. But it's Bobby Marshman.
Ward, yeah.
It's Bobby Marshman, Parnelli Jones, AJ, Roger Ward, and Don Branson.
Yeah.
Those days had to have been amazing.
Oh, I was. I mean, when I look back, quite honestly, Bobby, and the opportunities that I had to race, with these icons, and, of the dirt tracks and so forth, I mean, I wouldn't change that career for anything. And yet, I always there was always something about Formula One. I'm looking at Dan Gurney up here, and he was in Formula One when he got his ride after, competing with Darciero, the Ferraris. He gets a ride in Formula One with Ferrari. And I'm sitting in a midget in Hatfield, Pennsylvania. And this is 1963, when I won 3 races in one day. was the last race, and I'm sitting in the car so proud, but I'm thinking of Dan Gurney. I'm thinking, you know, there was something about it, like, I would have loved to just, you know, I said, well, I'm here, you know, but I don't know, somehow, you know, that's where my mind was, you know. And it's amazing how, you know, things go, but, you know, throughout my career, that's really where my mind was ultimately, you know, because that's how I was brought up.
Right.
You know, but again, you know, all along, the opportunities that I've had, you know, when I see like Parnelli Jones and so forth, and you know, here's a guy that, I mean, a true hero of mine. I mean, these are guys that you draw the absolute inspiration from, and because they're the best of the best. And having had the opportunity to drive against, you know, these icons, it was just something that, you know, you cannot put a value to, quite honestly. And I count my blessings every day about that, because of just these opportunities that are so special.
And they don't exist anymore.
They don't exist anymore.
And of course, there was a little bit of mischief that was held in those days too. I mean, was it true that you actually duct taped Bobby Unser inside a Porta-John prior to qualifying? I don't know what race it was, but
well, it was,
and that's not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing, but this was in Hanford, California, and I mean, and he had it coming. He had it coming because we're driving back from the track, and I don't know why he's riding with me, because he's too cheap to rent a car, you know. So I had to hear brand new Hertz, and I'm coming off the freeway, and he blindfolds me, you know. So I'm going, boom, you know, I hit the curb, and of course we blow a left front tire, and I said, I'm not going to change the tire. So I kept driving until the thing just pretty much caught fire, you know. So so I pull over, and so now are we going to, so Bobby stands on the roof of the car, and he's jumping around, I mean, in my car, my rental car, and he's trying to stop somebody. So who stops? Danny Jones from Ford. You know, he had a, you know, he had a tie on and everything. You know, he was one of the guys representing Ford at the time. And so he said, boys, he said, you know, what's wrong? I said, I don't know, man. I said, where the hell is the spare car in these cars, you know? Oh, I'll show you. You know, so obviously, you know, he goes in the trunk, and he leaves his car running, so we jump in his car, and off we go. You know, so, and I felt that I owed Bobby one. So the next day, and this is true. The next day, we're all, you know, we're waiting to qualify, and of course, you know, we all drew our spots and so forth, and I go out and qualify, and then I go Page, Bobby Unser. Bobby. I said, you know, Bobby Unser is an emergency call in the booth. So he goes to the booth, and I just ran over and just taped him
Oh, so it was
around.
the phone booth. It wasn't the
phone booth.
Oh,
yeah, phone booth. And so, you know, Judd Phillips was, you know, looking for him to go out, so he missed his turn qualifying. Can you imagine today? You know?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, anyway, he didn't qualify
I think there needs to
too
be more
good
of
that
that
day.
today, actually.
But it was a retaliation later on that. But, you know, some of those.
So we're here in Long Beach. You're going to be the Grand Marshal. You won here 77 in F1, which was a fantastic race. 84, 85, 87. Does any of those stand out amongst the others, or is every, you know? I mean, you're always asked that, right? What's your greatest win? I mean, your last one was the greatest one, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the win is a win. Like I said, no matter how lucky you are, you never win enough, you know, so every win is important. Obviously, the Formula One had this special meaning to U.S., you know, to win the U.S. GP and all of that, and the fact that this event was just pretty much in its infancy, and you know, it was good all around. We got, the exposure that I think it needed. But all of it, I mean, the Indy races, IndyCar races here, again, I cannot, I always say, and I mean it, I said, every win has got that, that special.
Exactly.
I mean, you can dissect it, but, and then Long Beach has been fabulous to us, to me, and to the family. Here's, Michael won his very first IndyCar race right here, and so again, there's some magic about this place, and I could see just coming in here for the cocktail party, and I see what I see here. The people that just love to come, to this event. And all of us represent, I mean, the ages, really. So the tradition here is just a very, it's fabulous, and it's special, more special every year. Mm-hmm. It's got that draw to it. So, we're so lucky,
Yep.
to be part of it, obviously, and it gets better. It gets
Well,
better.
one more question before I bring your brother up. Then we're going to really ask some interesting questions. But Newman Haas, could there have ever been two more dissimilar partners in a team than Paul Newman and Carl Haas?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing how that relationship really came about, because Carl was obviously the one that was supplying the cars to Paul Newman when he owned the Can-Am series
Mm-hmm.
cars, and Paul was accusing Carl of always sending him the heaviest cars and all that sort of thing. So, and when and Paul had been romancing me through Maston Gregory, actually. If you remember, Maston
Sure.
Gregory
Yeah,
was
yeah.
his, a great driver, himself. But he worked for Paul, during the Can-Am days, especially at the very end of the series. And I was doing Formula One at the time, and he was trying to hire me to do some races, but and I just couldn't do it. But since it was the end of the Can-Am series, I always felt what a great opportunity to have a guy like Paul come into the Indy cars, and somehow at the time I didn't have the confidence. Can you imagine me not having the confidence?
No.
Like
No.
even in Barry Green was running, his team.
Yeah,
I figured,
no.
he's too green. He can't,
Literally too green,
literally,
yeah.
he could. And so that's why, and I formed a relationship with Carl because Michael was running in the Formula 4s with Carl and so forth. And then Carl was one that I felt maybe would be a good prospect, to join the ranks. And so I suggested, I said, why don't these two dudes get together?
Well, and you had, there's a great picture. You had driven for Paul, or we were associated with Paul with the Honker too.
Yeah.
The great story is it had Paul Newman's name on the front of it.
Yeah.
It was not a very good car, and
That
you
was the
said, "I'll
worst
put
car
my
ever."
name on the car, and you let Paul drive it." Right? Is that true?
That's true, exactly. Yeah, that was the worst car I've ever.
Well, I always.
It was.
That's a lot to say too, right?
It was. Oh, that was.
It looked good, but that's about where
It looked good, nice and pink, but man, that was a bad car. But anyway, this relationship with it started out like very tense and rocky, but it turned out to be a marriage made in heaven, because as obviously the results speak for themselves. But I got to tell you something though. You've been blessed by Carl, and because of that, I know the one race that you won. I got to tell them the story.
Yeah, that's right.
It was in Mid-Ohio,
Yep.
and I think it was 1986.
Seven.
I think maybe six or
Yeah, it
seven.
might have been six. Yeah, probably six.
I think it was 6.
Or 5. I think. Oh, anyway. doesn't
86.
matter.
Anyway, and so as you know, Carl very religious and God bless him. He just loved to do exactly that. Just always, bless the car and do all that. He had a ritual, and some of us made fun, but he was serious about it. And so the cars are being pulled up on the grid, and both Bobby's in my car are red. And so I think I'm on pole and you're third.
Second.
You were
I'm
third,
second.
right behind me.
Okay.
Well, either
Doesn't matter.
You were up front, but my car hadn't arrived there. So your car arrives there, and here's Carl, doing his ritual on your car.
Yeah.
And
I
so
got on the phone to Steve Horn, my team manager,
Yeah.
said, Steve, check this out.
yeah, I know. And it was a Lola.
Yeah. And here's Carl doing.
Carl
he touches
doing
the
his thing.
suspension. He touches the tires.
And one of the mechanics went, Mr. Haas, says, this is not your car. I go, So I don't know whether he neutralized the blessings or not, but here I go, and early on in the race, something with the ignition, so I'm out of the race. And this is not true, but I told Carl, I said, and he won the race. I said, you blessed this car. I says, I dropped out of the race on the 13th lap. He says, oh, no. I said, the 13th, it wasn't. I said, the 13th lap. I said, I said, thanks a lot. I said, so.
True story.
A true story.
All right. Can we invite your brother up?
Yeah, sure.
Aldo, please. Aldo Andretti. Aldo, it's great having you here with us. Welcome.
Well, thanks, but I don't think I can top any of those stories, though.
Well, I don't know. I got. There was this if none of you have seen this, there's this fantastic thing that came out. It's Gran Turismo 6 or whatever.
Yeah.
Where they
PlayStation.
They take. They decide they're going to take the Hudson, or a Hudson, that was very similar to their first race car, and they find it. It's a story. It's a video story, and they find this car in the woods, and they resurrect this car to be exactly the car that Mario and Aldo drove. It was apparently a couple years older, but same basic car, and it's really cool. I really encourage you guys, because there's a great interviews with Mario and what have you about the beginnings, and it really is special. And in it, of course, these guys, immigrants, work hard in a gas station, put a few bucks together, go racing, and they flipped to see who would drive the first race. Flipped a coin.
Right. Yeah.
And you won.
Well, not really. He won, but the race got rained out, so that didn't count.
Oh.
So I had to run.
That's how it
I had
was.
to run the first race. Yeah.
And you won the race.
I won the race.
You won the race.
Yeah,
So I think the burning question everybody has here tonight is, who is faster?
I'll take it for now.
You know what?
He was.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Aldo actually, like I said, the very first race we had no idea what to expect, as you can imagine. But
Never drove a dirt track.
no, we never did. But we put together about 4 or 5 guys, and there was always the scientist, the guy that just knows, and they come up with a pretty good setup that actually was being used in NASCAR. The Hudson cars back in the 50s, were really strong, especially on a short oval, dirt ovals, because, and nobody knew really why, but it's because the unibody construction made it torsionally so stiff, so the car really held the cross weight, so you could just power around the corner really nice. And on the local racetrack, they were running all, the 37 cut down rail jobs, very real flexi flyers and all that. And so when we show up with this big Hudson boat, everybody just, laughing. But you know what? In those days, we had no idea how the hell to really introduce ourselves. But we bought a Salasport. There was racing uniforms from Italy. So we show up. Everybody else had his T-shirts on. We showed up and said we could tell everybody, hey, we used to drive Formula Junior cars in Italy. And that one stuck with Chris Economac for like 30 years. Yeah. So that story. And, you know, of course, no computer, you know, so, you know, nobody could check that. But, we arrived in the States in 1955, and in 57, we started building this car with the idea that we would run it when we were 21, in 61. And because you had to be 21 to legally race professionally in those days.
Right.
And but we got the car done in 2 years later, 59. So we got local Les Young, you know, the local editor of the Nazareth Key newspaper, and we said, can you do a little job on our birth date on our license, you know, and so they fudged that, and so we started racing in 59, age 19, and as you can see, Aldo was the first one to go, and we figured, you know, we had no idea what to expect, and so they started him last in the heat, and he goes out there and he's passing one car after another, he wins the heat. I go, holy mackerel, you know, and so that's $25. You know, we had about $1,000 invested in this thing, and he wins the feature the same way. You know, he just goes out, and that was $150. You know, so I mean, we're doing good. You know, and but anyway, it was just amazing. And then of course the big onus was on me the following weekend to try to do the same. You know, but it was great. I mean, Aldo won a lot of races that year. Then he got hurt actually in that car, the very last race of the season. He was his fault. He was. I mean, it was an invitational, 100-lapper in Hatfield, Pennsylvania, and I already qualified. I was driving for somebody else, and we're driving. Our car was a sportsman against the modifieds, and he's qualified. He's running behind this guy. The track champion was Freddie Adams, and he's trying to beat him, but he was qualified, and I was just throwing my body on the track, you know, just qualify, you know, and here he just hooked the guardrail and the end over end, and oh gosh, he had a huge, big accident at that point. That was that.
And of course, your father didn't know you were racing.
Oh gosh, yeah, that was.
And didn't approve of that, right? I mean, wouldn't countenance.
Our dad just didn't want to know. I mean, you know, unfortunately, you know, he was totally ignorant about the sport, and you know, and all he knew was about you know, the negatives, you know, the fatalities and so forth, and so he didn't understand it. So we had to just do it and defy him. But you know, we won some races during that season, of course, and at work, you know, some of his boss would go, "Hey, Gigi, your kids are really doing good," you know, and he thought our defense was the language barrier because he couldn't speak English, you know, so he thought that all he was getting.
Yeah, you can never figure out why every morning he worked at the Bethlehem Steel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's right. Every morning when he was clocking in the morning, everybody was patting him on the back. You know?
Yes,
and he says, oh, the boys, oh yeah, the good boys, they work at the gas station, they good clean up windshield.
He had no idea.
I had no idea.
Well, my dad was a proud man. He didn't want anybody to talk to him too much because he didn't understand what they were saying.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't want to sound like he was a dummy.
Yeah.
And so he kind of, you know, just waved it off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love this story, you know, of the, you know, guys came over with nothing and you made so much. And I think that's the American story.
That's
and
definitely the
it's
American
tremendous.
dream, yeah.